You're very likely looking at flagships the wrong way, or have been misled in what flagships actually are. No, I'm not about to spout about how much better Chinese smartphones are. That's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about the Galaxy S25 and the S25 Plus, the iPhone 16 Pro, the Pixel 9 Pro and the Xiaomi 15. There's something that you need to know about flagships, and today I want to unpack that. By the way guys, really trying to hit 150,000 subscribers, so if you wouldn't mind hitting that button, it would mean the world to me. Thank you very much. So most would argue that something like the Galaxy S25 Plus or the Pixel 9 Pro classify as flagship smartphones, but that is not technically the case, or at least not in the literal sense. And that all comes down to what the word flagship actually means. It originates from the late 1600s. It means the warship or naval ship that bears the admiral's flag. It distinguished an explicit sign that the ship was the top, the best, the most important. There have been many of these among different fleets, but there was one flagship, really translating to the best. Using that literal sense of the phrase, the Pixel 9 Pro, is that a flagship Pixel? Well, no, that is not the flagship Pixel. That would arguably be the Pro XL or maybe the Pro Fold. The best objectively. Now, there might be a flagship component inside of the Pixel 9 Pro. Tensor G4 is currently the best SoC that Google makes, so therefore the Tensor G4 is Google's flagship chipset. But that can be found in even the base model Pixel 9 or even the 9A, so it's not exactly the thing that makes the phone a flagship. Perhaps this is clearer with the Galaxy S25 Plus, which, like its relatives in the S25 family, uses the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Elite, the then flagship Qualcomm mobile SoC. The chipset that the company hangs its hat on. It's the best, or at least it was at the time of the S25's release. And that chipset again does not make the phone Samsung's flagship phone. That title either goes to the S25 Ultra or maybe the Z Fold 7. The S25 isn't a flagship, and I think there are three things that confuse this for people and muddy the waters of what a flagship product should be or what people's expectations are. Firstly is pricing. I can't tell you the number of times I've spoken to someone about a phone that I'm reviewing. They'll point it out and go, wow, that's a really cool phone. I'll say, yes it is, but it's also quite expensive. It's £1,100, let's say. And then they'll reply with, that is absolutely extortionate and there is no way that I'd ever spend that kind of money on a smartphone, a flagship smartphone. Well, the thing is, these days you could pay £1,100 on a device that isn't even the best in its own lineup, that isn't even the flagship. The phones I mentioned right at the start of the video, the Pixel 9 Pro, the S25 Plus, the iPhone Pro, they aren't the flagship phones, yet are priced astronomically so. And when people see big money purchases like that, especially with smartphones, they assume that they're getting the best, and that is very rarely the case, unfortunately. Off topic, but do you remember when you could buy a good used car for 1100 quid? We truly live in different times, man. Pricing has disrupted and confused what a lot of us feel like is a reasonable amount of money to spend on a product. Which sort of goes hand in hand with my next point in that lineup saturation has become a bit of a joke in the last few years. For those into computers watching this video, do you remember when there was a very reasonable Nvidia GeForce GTX lineup and one that made sense? Now it's a complete cluster, and no wonder people are getting ripped off trying to find the best card because there are just so many. If we apply that same kind of thinking to Samsung, look at the Galaxy S25 series. There are 4 phones in that series, and just a few years ago there was one. If you wanted the best Galaxy, the flagship, you bought the Galaxy S3. And these days there are so many different models in the same family and then even sub-family of product, it's hard to keep track of what's actually the best. This product saturation basically means instead of being large gaps in between each model, these companies have been trying to fill in the gaps with as many different subtle differences to the product as possible until there's hardly any space between the products at all and you've saturated the market. Sometimes there are even overlaps between products, which makes things even harder to comprehend. And it's not just phones and graphics cards, by the way. You'll now find this crap absolutely everywhere, and it's my best guess that this is all just to sell as much as possible and squeeze every last drop out of the market, which is A bit dystopian, but that's kind of where we are. And the third reason why this has happened is the messaging. Not only from these big companies, but from people like me who have for the longest time called these things flagships. It's almost like the word has completely lost its meaning, like many that really have in recent years, and have deviated from their origin and definition. The real flagships are the best phones or products that a company makes. For Apple, it is the Pro Max, for Google, it is the Pro XL, for Samsung, it is the S Ultra, Xiaomi, it's the Ultra, Vivo, it's the Ultra, Huawei, it's the Ultra. Okay, you might kind of get the point at this stage. But does all of this really matter? Well, as long as you're not being misled into thinking that a product is its company's flagship, then I guess not. Not at least in the same way that people think that 1440p is 2K, when in actual fact that resolution is far closer to 1080p than it is 1440p. But I think since most people don't know what the word flagship truly means, or ignore the actual meaning, they're unlikely to really feel hard done by when they get their shiny new Pixel 9 home and realise it's not the best smartphone in Google's lineup. When you realise what the word flagship means, you can more easily visualise and segment the different products in the smartphone market to help make better purchasing decisions, even if you're not actually going out to buy a flagship, to buy the best product. Product dilution and market saturation is something that I've personally been thinking about since the Galaxy S7 series, and I've been wanting to make a video like this for some time, so thank you for letting me get this video out there. But when all is said and done, there are a couple of rules to follow in order to make sure that your purchasing decision is the right one. Firstly, never take a company's claims for granted. Go read reviews, read Reddit threads from posts from real people who have actually used devices. Watch YouTube videos, and importantly, take all of that information with a pinch of salt to build up your own interpretation. Don't lean heavily into one or the other. There's always going to be nuance, internal bias for positives and negatives, and what you might want in a smartphone could be completely the opposite to someone else, so please do hold an open mind. And secondly, ask yourself if it's really worth upgrading. Are you buying a new phone because your old one is haggard? Are you after a particular feature that the new one has and that yours doesn't? Or do you actually need to? This part of the internet, particularly the one that I inhabit, can be a dangerous place for people who have little self-control and will blindly just buy and upgrade because of the hype that surrounds new products. Stay mindful and make the right decision. If you want the best of the best, make sure that you're actually getting that. And if you don't, that's absolutely okay too. There is no harm in picking up a bargain. Much like many other techie terms, the word flagship gets used incorrectly all the time. I myself am guilty of this. But when you start to realise what the word flagship actually means, the smartphone market becomes clearer and easier to understand. And I think that's important.